We want to heal ourselves from the inside out. We want to stop sickness before it even happens. I'm Dr. Klein again, and I'm here to make you strong in your exile. Last time we talked about the squat. One thing you might have noticed in the squat is that you're using different type of breathing muscles. One reason I gave you the squat was actually to teach you how to breathe a little bit better. Because we may bend about 4,000 times a day, or squat on the average person, but the average person breathes 20 to 30,000, which is not even a comparison, right? It's the most repetitive exercise we do. So how can breathing hack our nervous system? That's the question. How can we hack our health by changing how we're breathing? And what's wrong with the way that we breathe? Well, let's talk about what's good about this position first. If you have a little baby or a kettlebell, it's actually a great counterbalance to help hold you deeper in the squat. Your breathing gets a little labored. You start using muscles you're not used to. And that's actually because we've changed our center of gravity a little bit. We brought our hips back behind us just a little bit. We've brought this length, a muscle called our psoas. Psoas runs from our hips and attaches to our diaphragm. It helps anchor it, pull it down, so our ribs don't flare forward when we breathe and we don't breathe from our shoulders. If we're always breathing from our shoulders, that creates stress on the neck, creates stress on the nervous system, creates stress on all your organ systems. So the psoas pulls down on the diaphragm right here. So it's a hip flexor, your upper hip flexor. It's one of the major stabilizers of our lumbopelvic region, our lower back. So when we breathe here, it's hard to use our shoulders because the diaphragm is anchored. A lot of us breathe from our shoulders, flare our ribs. You can't, really hard to flare your ribs in this position. The breath goes into your back. It goes into 3 different muscle groups, and we'll break these down. They're all serratus muscles. They're rib cage expander muscles. We're trying to get more space and maintain that space. Not only does that expand the rib cage, challenges new muscles, but takes stress off the spine, which means it takes stress off your nervous system. And there's so many studies already about how your gut and breathing are connected. So we're not going to get into super detail about that. You can just trust the science. There's a lot of talk about the autonomic nervous system, stress breathing, breathing from the shoulders, short, shallow breaths, breathing through the mouth. So I'm going to train you to nasal breathe, blowing out. We're exhaling slowly through the nose. It's a filter. Everyone's wearing masks. You didn't know you had a filter right on your face. In through the nose, slowly out through the nose, or whistling out through the mouth if you need to get that air out. That slow exhale causes our muscles, our serratus muscles, to maintain the expansion, which makes them work. The more we create space, the more we can breathe into that space when we're not thinking about it, because breathing is mostly an unconscious, involuntary action, right? But we can make it active and voluntary. And the more we work on expanding and retraining our breathing, strengthen our breathing muscles, it's going to last. It's going to make lasting changes, and that's going to make a big correction. Think about something you're doing all day long. If you can improve on it, that's going to change your health dramatically, I promise you. It's not going to be instant, but in the long run, it will make a big change. So toxicity builds up from the inside, and it comes out of us. And there's a lot of studies even how viral toxicity can shed to others if we're not healthy. In Matthew 15, Jesus is telling the Pharisees, it's not what they put into their bodies that defiles them, it's what comes out of their bodies. Now we understand this having to do with the ritual of hand washing. And Jesus is talking about the Pharisees and how they're unloving. They're putting these traditions above what's really important. So we understand that loving our neighbors is being there to take care of them. And that's another reason why being strong in your exile, strengthening your body, stopping disease before the symptoms of sickness show up. Because we understand disease is festering, it's lingering, it's hiding, and we don't feel the symptoms, right? Sometimes we don't feel the symptoms until the toxicity is too great. And that's a great way to think about it. What goes into the body is what comes out. What comes out is toxicity. And if we have a lot of toxicity, whether it's hate and stress that's emotional, that's going to come out of us as well because it's festering inside of us. Same thing goes for toxic stress or traumatic stress. It builds up. It accumulates an injury or disease or pathology, however you want to think about it. So it's what comes out of us. So we have to heal ourselves from the inside out. Because ultimately, rule number one is your number one. You can't go into the mission field if you are a mission field. Same thing goes for your health. We got to take care of ourselves. This doesn't mean pampering yourself. It means just making these little movement hacks, changing how you're moving, changing how you're breathing. It doesn't waste any time. It's just adapting to move as God intended you to move, so you'll be stronger for others. So being loving for others sometimes takes that foresight to know that tough times are coming, right? You need to be prepared for those who aren't being prepared. You need to be strong for your children. So many diseases can be prevented just by changing how we breathe, how we move. Think about all the expenses, all the money we spend on insurance. My dad always would tell me, it's not about health insurance, it's about health assurance. Making sure your body's strong, so in the future, you have the assurance of good health. We need a good foundation. Yeah, calamity's always going to happen. There's always going to be a need for surgery and drugs, but some people are living day to day off surgery and drugs, and even the natural. Like, I'm a chiropractor. There's people coming in 4 times a week, and I was one of you, getting adjusted 4 times a week by several different chiropractors because I was sick all the time. I was in pain all the time. We're wasting all that time, all that resource, being in pain and not being there for the people that need us. And we're wasting resources. We're being a drain on the community. So we need to band together, start taking care of ourselves for our community as a whole, and have better health assurance. All right, so we're going to teach you some breathing exercises in the standing position, give you a break from the squat. The squat is just an easier way to understand this and just do it naturally, but we can do it how we're seated and how we're standing. So you can just apply a lot of what I'm going to teach you right now in the hinge position into a seated position. We want to hinge, why? Because we want to activate adductor iliopsoas, which help turn the hips in, pull. Even that little motion, that little internal rotation activates my diaphragm. Changes how I'm breathing. No longer are the ribs flaring open where I feel my shoulders come up and retract and my rib flares, right? This goes open, this goes out. So we're keeping our belly, our hands on our belly to remind us to rotate in, pull your hips back just a little bit as we lengthen our head, tightening this area. We're keeping it taut and long. I'm breathing away from my fingertips, breathing into the back. So this is our first serratus muscle, serratus posterior inferior. Not expecting you to remember it, but it's a little V shape. Runs from your lumbar spine up to those bottom ribs. So we're getting some tension there by hinging, finding that stretch in the upper hamstring, the glutes. 10 breaths. Breathe into that lower serratus. It's trying to open up that space. Pulling those ribs apart. Lengthening that spine. After you've done those 10, we're going to go up top here. This is serratus anterior. It runs to the sides of the ribs. Push your elbows away from each other. 10 there. We're trying to open up the space. That serratus anterior runs underneath your shoulder blades, pulls it apart. Most of us, we bring our center of gravity forward, pinch our shoulder blades back. So we just never have that space open. It's always compressed. So we're actually trying to maybe even round a little bit in the mid back. We don't want to round from the low back. We want to keep the low back long, strong. Maybe a little rounding here just to breathe that space. Widen. Last group of muscles, serratus posterior superior. So thumb's right here. So this muscle is attaching to the cervical spine, to the upper ribs. So pretend like you're holding a barbell and you're just lifting your elbows high, pushing your hips away from your elbows. Thumbs are right above the collarbones. This is forcing me to lengthen my neck. I'm getting active, like I'm pulling the back of my head away from my tailbone. Another 10 breaths here. Always going in through the nose, out through the nose. As we're levering those elbows up, you might even feel that intense stretch. We're putting a bunch of stretch, activating those muscles. When you kind of got it going right, you can go back, you can kind of hit
All three. Maybe reach the hands out, hips away from hands, grab the ground with your feet. Breathe into all of those. Each inhale, you can push a little deeper. See the shake I got going on? The shake is change. We've activated that front chain of the body, stretching the back, using all our rib cage expander muscles. You're holding under that tension, spending time under tension. Whole body stretch. It's stretching all these tight compressive muscles that just pull us back, change our center of gravity, push our pubic bone forward, cause our hips to unravel. Then we no longer have support from the ground up. So breathing connected to what we're doing with the hips, it's going to change your nervous system, take stress off it. Even just a little bit of that, whew, instant sweat, feel looser. That's going to change how you're breathing. And you're just applying that throughout the day. Just like with the squat, you're trying to throw more squats in there. Anytime you're picking something up, do that squat. Now you can time it with the breathing. So when we squat, we can inhale to lengthen the spine. Because remember, the tendency we talked about before was the spine starts to bend, the knees start to do the motion, instead of us training long spine, hips in control of the motion, hips pressing out of the position. So even going down is the most important point. A lot of people miss that, is that activation of this chain in the front, activation of that psoas, because we can have that rib flare here, and you can see how the neck collapses too and compresses the back. Difference? So apply that, what we taught you already, and be on the road to making great changes for your health, making you Exile-Strong.